everybody, it's Christina and we're talking test tips, and today we're going to talk about the PSAT for sophomores and for juniors. Today we're going to discuss the PSAT 10 and the PSAT NMSQT. What is the PSAT? How is the PSAT 10 and the PSAT NMSQT different? How seriously should you take it? And whether you need to study for it. All right, so both PSATs are a practice SAT, and they are very similar to the SAT in content and format. However, the content is slightly easier than that of the SAT. Also, the PSATs are graded on a scale from 320 to 1520, while the SAT is graded on a 400 to 1600 point scale. So the reason that the content of the PSAT 10 and PSAT NMSQT is slightly easier than that of the SAT is to account for the fact that you are taking the test sooner than you would probably take the real SAT. In other words, the math section will have fewer Algebra 2 topics, and the reading passages may be a little less dense than what you would find on the real SAT. Plus, you'll have a little bit more time per question than you do on the SAT. But just like the real SAT, the PSAT tests your ability to recognize problems in an unfamiliar environment and recall how to solve them. So both PSATs last 2 hours and 45 minutes. So the reading section is 60 minutes and has 47 questions. The writing and language section is 35 minutes and has 44 questions. The math without a calculator is 25 minutes with 17 questions. And the math with a calculator is 45 minutes with 31 questions. Now, let's look at how the two kinds of PSATs are different. So the PSAT 10, which is for sophomores, is purely a practice test. On the other hand, the PSAT NMSQT, which is for students in their third year, usually junior year in high school, is a practice test for the SAT, but it is also a means of entry into the National Merit Scholarship Program. So how seriously should you take it? Well, let's start with the PSAT 10, right? This test is a great way to get your baseline SAT score and a helpful jumping off place for future studying. It's also a way to experience the testing environment without the added pressure of feeling like you need to earn a certain score. But beyond this, the PSAT 10 doesn't have much significance, and colleges will not see your PSAT 10 or your PSAT NMSQT score. Now, the PSAT NMSQT has a bit more weight. Sure, you are also getting an accurate baseline SAT score and experiencing the testing environment. However, there is some added pressure if you want to be a competitive candidate for the National Merit Scholarship Program. So the score you make on the PSAT NMSQT will determine if you're able to move forward in the scholarship process. So becoming a National Merit Scholar starts with your PSAT NMSQT score, but it does not end there. Your score qualifies you to enter the competition, but from there, a series of rounds reduces the 1.6 million students who entered down to the 7,500 students that earn the distinction National Merit Scholar. And this award is presented in the spring of your senior year. Okay, so the big question, do you really need to study? Well, again, let's start with that PSAT 10. It can be helpful to look over a practice test so you can get a sense of how the test is formatted, how the questions are asked. So maybe you read a passage and answer some questions in the reading and writing and language sections, and try a few math questions. See if maybe you notice any differences in the questions with and without calculator. Or if you're having trouble with the student-generated response questions in the math section. But the overall idea is just for you to familiarize yourself with the test more than you are actually studying for the test. If you are a nervous test taker or are worried about pacing, then go ahead and take a practice test. Just remember that the purpose of this test is a starting point. You can always do plenty of prep before you take the real thing. Now, how much you should or shouldn't study for the PSAT NMSQT really depends on two things. One, do you think you have a chance to earn a high enough score to be eligible for National Merit Scholar? And two, are you taking Algebra 2 or equivalent or a higher math class your junior year? So if you answered yes to either of those questions, then yes, you should study for the PSAT NMSQT. And the first question makes sense, right? If you think you could qualify for National Merit Scholar, then you should definitely do some prep before you take the test. But the second question needs a little bit more context. So we did a previous video where I discussed a timeline for when to prep and when to take the SAT and ACT. And in the video, I explained a really good rule of thumb. If you are taking Algebra 2 your junior year, then the spring of your junior year is the best time to take the SAT and or ACT for the first time. If, on the other hand, you took Algebra 2 your sophomore year, then the winter of your junior year is the best time to take the SAT and or ACT for the first time. So if you are planning to take the SAT and or ACT for the first time in the winter, then your prep for the SAT and or ACT should be well underway before the time of the PSAT NMSQT. So it is not so much that you are studying for the PSAT NMSQT as you are studying for your upcoming SAT and or ACT. Plus, the PSAT NMSQT will serve as a great indicator of how well your prep is coming along. So the takeaway here is that the PSAT is a practice SAT. The PSAT 10 offers a baseline SAT score and a jumping off point for future studying. Thus, you want to do your best, but it doesn't require too much studying. The PSAT NMSQT, however, could qualify you for a National Merit Scholarship Program and serve as a great indicator for how well prepared you are for a possible winter SAT and or ACT. So you may need to take it seriously depending on your goals, but wherever you are in your journey, the PSAT is not something to fret about, but rather a tool to offer some insight into how you'll do on the SAT. All right, happy practicing!